Should you ever carry a handgun with an empty chamber? This is a hotly debated question, and in this video, I'm going to try to give you my own perspective on it. So you may ask, first of all, if you're fairly new to guns, why would someone want to carry a gun with the chamber empty? And it's because if there's no bullet in the chamber of your gun, then it can't accidentally misfire. And you've probably gone online or looked at YouTube videos and you've seen that people accidentally shoot their firearm all the time. It could happen for a variety of reasons. If you go to draw your weapon and you accidentally put your finger on the trigger, when you pull out the gun, it could fire at your leg or at an innocent bystander. If you're holding your gun and it slips out of your hand and instinctively you try to grab it and catch it, you can accidentally put your finger on the trigger and that can fire. Again, shooting whatever it happened to be aiming at the time. So there's a number of reasons how guns can accidentally fire, and unfortunately it does happen all the time. And it even happens with some experienced gun users. And if you talk to some experts, they'll say, well, if you want to prevent misfiring, then you just need to train better. You need to have better habits. You need to always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. You have to practice a lot. You have to never try to catch a falling gun, etc. The problem is that they're right. I mean, the best way to learn how to handle a gun is to exercise good habits all the time. The problem is that we're human, and so people do make mistakes. And the other problem is that in a real-life situation, under the stress of a real-world event, if you're being attacked or confronted, the first thing you lose is your fine motor skills. And so if you've studied any martial art, you will understand that any of the complicated moves that you thought you knew so well when you did them in the dojo, when you get into a street situation, they just suddenly go out of your mind and you can't do them because we freeze under pressure and we lose those fine motor skills. And putting your trigger or keeping your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, that is a fine motor skill. And that's something that can escape you when you need it most. As an analogy, I would say that I could put a beam of wood on the ground in my backyard, and every day I can practice walking across that wooden beam, no problem. But if you suddenly suspended that same beam across 2 skyscrapers, and now I was 500 feet up in the air, there's no way I can do it. My legs would buckle, my balance would be terrible, my muscles would freeze up. It would be extremely difficult to do something that I normally could do very easily because the stress of the event changes everything. So I just think it's a little disingenuous to say, if you never want to accidentally fire a gun, then you need to practice better. Practice is great, you should definitely do it, but it doesn't mean that those fine motor skills will always be there when you need it most. So if you're new to guns, you might not know that if you take any semi-automatic pistol like this one, this is a Glock 26, and they all work basically the same way. If you take an unloaded weapon like this, you can see it's unloaded because there's no magazine in there. You can actually see right through the gun. And there's no round in the chamber in there. You can see that it's empty. If you take an unloaded weapon like this and you insert a cartridge, a magazine, fully loaded with ammunition, and you press the trigger, it will not fire. Because with these types of weapons, what you need to do is you need to rack the slide and you need to chamber that first round before it will fire. And the genius of these weapons is that after you do it the first time, you don't need to do it anymore. Because whenever you pull the trigger and the pistol fires, some of the energy sends the bullet out the barrel and at your target, and some of the energy actually throws this slide back, and then it spring loads back to its original position. And as it's doing that, it scoops up the next bullet from the magazine. So it automatically reloads itself, and all you have to do is press the trigger again. But the first time you do it, you need to rack the slide to chamber that round. And until you do that, for all intents and purposes, this pistol cannot fire. So some people like the comfort of that. They're uncomfortable carrying a firearm, and maybe they feel that they're low risk. And they think, I don't want this gun to accidentally go off while I'm at my cousin's barbecue, or while I'm sitting at church, or while I'm just walking the dog. I like the peace of mind knowing that I've got a weapon on me, it's there for an insurance policy, but there's almost 0% chance that it can accidentally misfire because I never chambered around. And some people like that peace of mind. I think it makes a lot of sense that some people want to carry a firearm as extra insurance policy in case someday they need it, but they really don't want to worry about this gun accidentally going off when they draw it from their holster or when they put it back into their holster or whatever the case may be. They're just not quite comfortable with that. And so they want to keep that chamber empty. They want to keep the gun, but they want to carry it around in an extra safe way like that. And for me, it really comes down to this continuum of speed versus safety. And the truth of the matter is that in some self-defense situations, you will have time to draw your weapon, rack the slide, and have it ready to fire. Maybe you're driving somewhere on the freeway and your car breaks down or you have to pull over and you have time to rack the slide. Or some car is following you and you feel uncomfortable about it and they cut you off. You pull out your weapon, you rack the slide. Or you're walking somewhere and in the distance you think that someone might be following you or something doesn't seem right. Again, you can discreetly pull out your weapon and rack the slide. But it's also very true that there are some situations where you simply will not have time to perform that extra step. One example would be if you're mugged. If you're mugged, it happens almost immediately. You're walking down the street, two guys are coming the other way. One guy stops you to ask you for the time. You look up and all of a sudden his buddy pulls out a knife and says, "Give me your wallet." It would be very risky for you to draw your weapon and then rack the slide because that extra step is an extra second that this guy has to stab you, to shoot you, to do whatever it is. Another situation would be if you're a woman. You just have to know that a lot of assaults against women happen instantaneously. You're grabbed from behind or you're walking to your car and you look up and the second you see someone, he's already on you. If you're lucky, you have time to draw your weapon and fire, and that would be a best case scenario. But if you actually had to draw your weapon and then rack the slide and then fire, you're probably not gonna have time. You need two hands to do that. It takes an extra fraction of a second to do that move, and it's really not realistic. So you need to think to yourself, well, how do I weigh out the safety with the speed of the situation? What types of situations am I likely to get myself into? Am I a high-risk individual or a low-risk individual? And I know for me, it all depends on the situation. I'm a male, I live in a very low-risk town, there's very low crime here, so the odds of me being abducted at gunpoint or something happening like that are very small. So for the most part, I feel very comfortable walking around my town carrying a weapon just in case I need it, but keeping the chamber empty because that way there's just no chance of it accidentally misfiring. But if I go to a place where I suddenly feel higher risk, I will treat the firearm differently and I will chamber around. So if my car breaks down on the highway and I have to pull over, that might be a place where I want to have my weapon ready. If I'm going into a city one night that has more crime, that may be a time I want to chamber the round. If I'm walking through the woods, right, away from the quote-unquote safety of being in public, that would be a place when I chambered around. If I hypothetically went camping and I had a family and so I'm there with my wife and my kids, we're hiking through the woods, we're camping, and all of a sudden we come upon two guys who have guns and say, the women are coming with us. There really would not be time for me to draw a weapon, chamber it, and then try to defend us. The gun would need to be ready. And even in, for example, in Los Angeles, where a lot of people are walking their dogs and their dogs are getting stolen, if you want to defend your dog and don't want it to be taken away, then you're not gonna have time to chamber that round. So the way I think about it for me is, if someone's just gonna mug me, I'm just gonna give them my money because material possessions can be replaced. And for me, it's not worth getting shot over. And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, well, if someone tries to mug me, I'll just pull out a gun and shoot them. And okay, maybe you can do that. And I wouldn't fault you for that, but you have to remember that a lot of times people commit those crimes with an accomplice. So you pull out a gun and there's a guy that you don't see behind you, an accomplice, or there's two accomplices waiting in the car 10 feet over there. You never know how robberies can go wrong because you don't have enough time to assess the situation. They happen so quickly. So I would advise people, just give them your money. If they want your watch, if they want your phone, if they want your wallet, just give them that stuff because it can be replaced. It's not worth getting shot or killed. But if someone comes up and they want you, or they want your daughter, or they want your dog, or something that you feel you can't replace, then you don't have that option, and you need to be able to draw that weapon and fire immediately. So what I really encourage people to do is, you don't have to take a hard line and say that carrying a gun with an empty chamber is a great idea or it's a terrible idea. I think it really depends on you and the situations you're likely to find yourself in. And you just need to kind of do those scenarios in your head where you say, given who I am and the types of places I go and the situations that are most likely to present themselves to me, would I have time to chamber around? And it can vary. Sometimes you can say, yes, I'll have time. I feel comfortable carrying this way. And other times you might say, no, I wouldn't have time. And you really need to make those decisions for yourself, because it's true that guns do accidentally discharge, and unfortunately it happens a lot. And it's also true that some crimes happen and they don't give you enough time to do that extra step of racking the slide. So you really kind of need to think through what those scenarios are for you and make the decision that makes the most sense for you.